Hello, Captain Stimson. Welcome to the show. We're thrilled you're with us today.
I'm so happy to be with you again, Janine, and all your fabulous crew there.
Well, all right. Today we're going to talk about military courts. So you're the man to talk about that. So we're going to let you chat about that for a little bit, and then we will pepper you with questions.
Sure. So I know a lot of our audience watches Law and Order or used to cop shows and that sort of thing. Maybe some of you have watched JAG. JAG is short for Judge Advocate General, which is what I am in the Navy. Maybe you saw A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise, where Jack Nicholson famously said, "You can't handle the truth." That was actually a real Navy court-martial that happened a long time ago and was made into a play and then a movie. But I don't think a lot of people understand where the military justice system or military courts martial fit into the broader fabric of our criminal justice system. So I'm going to try to lay it out for you quickly and then talk about why the military justice system is unique and needs to be unique. So there are, as you know, 50 states and the District of Columbia. And in each of the 50 states, there are counties. There are thousands of counties out there. So at the county level, most counties have an elected district attorney. In California, they're called DAs. In Virginia and some other states, they're called the Commonwealth's attorney. In some states like Maryland and Florida, they're called the state's attorney. Doesn't matter what they're called. They are the elected prosecutor by the people, and their job is to enforce the criminal law of that local jurisdiction. And believe it or not, there's 2,300 elected local prosecutors around the country, and they handle the vast majority of cases. So when you see Law and Order on TV or Special Victims Unit or that sort of thing, those are cases in LA or in New York State under local law. It has nothing to do with federal law. It's nothing to do with military law. It's all state-based law. And by the way, most crimes are prosecuted at the state or local level. So when you hear about prisons, prisons are places where people serve a year or more, and usually they're state-based crimes where people were convicted. Then on the other side of the aisle is the federal criminal justice system. And that is, of course, as you've seen, represented by the Attorney General. He's the top, he or she is the top law enforcement officer of the country. He's or she is nominated by a president, confirmed by a Senate, appointed to the job of the Attorney General. At the Maine Department of Justice, there are 94 U.S. attorneys around the United States. They are Senate confirmed individuals. And so they run the 94 offices all around the United States that prosecutes federal crimes. And I was an assistant United States attorney here in Washington doing homicides and violent crimes. It's a big office, it's 375 lawyers, but their charter is only to prosecute federal crimes. So bank robberies, big drug cases, and things like that. So when you heard about the First Step Act, the big criminal justice reform bill that passed under President Trump, and it was a very bipartisan bill, that was to reform the federal criminal justice system and how federal convicts in the federal penitentiary system are treated. That has nothing to do with military justice. Now, you have a United States military. And the military, at the top of the military, we have civilian control over the military, and the president, under Article 2 of the Constitution, is also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And under the president is the Secretary of Defense, and under the Secretary of Defense are the heads of the military services. Secretary of the Navy, Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Air Force, and now we, of course, have the Space Force. Congress has passed a series of laws creating or codifying crimes under the what's called Uniform Code of Military Justice, or UCMJ. And believe it or not, military justice within our armed forces predates the country itself. Disciplinary and criminal actions that commanders, people in charge of troops, had predated the forming of the United States of America, because there were armies and navies that pre-existed the formation of our country, and much of our law comes from the common law from England. Now, our military, first off, the military recruits people to work in the military. You're either enlisted, which usually means you don't have a high school or a college degree, or an officer. I'm an officer, I'm a captain, which is an officer at the 6th level up. We don't hire criminals. We just don't. So we don't, when you go through the screening process, we typically don't let people in who have a criminal record. At the same time, when you have a military active duty force of over 2 million people, some people are going to commit crimes, some people are going to make mistakes, and you have to have an ability to hold people accountable if they make those mistakes. And so understand, this is the key difference between the military justice system, Janine, and the civilian criminal justice system. The civilian justice system, whether it's the county, state level, or the federal level, the job of the prosecutors is to enforce the criminal law of the jurisdiction. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Their job is to do justice. It's not to get convictions. That's not the job of a prosecutor, although you sort of see that on TV and think that's their job. That's not their job, it's to do justice. But that's it. In the military, the criminal justice system, well, the military exists to defend the nation, right? I think we can all agree on that. And to defend the nation, you have to be able to follow orders of your commanding officers. And to accomplish the mission, commanding officers must be combat ready and effective, and the people under them have to be combat ready and effective. And so the commanders, the bosses, whether they're female or male, have to ensure that their troops under them, that they can maintain good order and discipline in their ranks. And so you can imagine if Jewel is my boss and we're in armed combat and he says, Stimson, charge that hill. And I go, I don't really feel like it. Not really my day. Haven't had my coffee, my feet hurt, totally not into it. We can't win wars when Admiral Jewel is ordering his people to take the hill. And so if I violate a lawful direct order, which that was a lawful direct order, and everyone violates a lawful direct order, the whole good order and discipline and ability to fight and win wars goes away. So our military justice system is designed to is designed to allow us to fight and win wars, to hold people accountable, and to maintain good order and discipline. So when you think of the military, you think of people who stand up straight and salute and march and follow orders. If we don't have a ability to make people do that in the military, the whole social compact falls apart. And so we have a code within the military justice system, a criminal code called the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And it has all the crimes you would think, stealing, robbing, murdering, all the crimes that you see out in town. We also have very specific military crimes. So for example, unauthorized absence, you would call it AWOL, absence without leave. If I am working, if I'm in a military unit and Admiral Kaplan over here is my boss, and I decide, I just don't feel like showing up for work today. And so I go to Starbucks and hang out for a while, and then I go to, Nordstrom Rack and buy some stuff, and then I show up 3 hours later. Admiral Kaplan, are you gonna be happy about that? Big no-no, right? And so you can give me a tongue lashing. That's one option. You can give me extra military instruction to make me learn about that. You could take any number of administrative remedies, which a commanding officer has. Or if I've done it multiple times, Admiral Kaplan could say, well, you know what, Stimson? I'm done with you. You've committed a crime. It's an authorized absence. I'm court-martialing you and sending you to a criminal trial. And then if the prosecutor Gillespie over there can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that I was not where I should have been at the time of my official duty, beyond a reasonable doubt, I'm guilty. And then I could go to, I'd probably get no time, no punishment much for that, except they probably take some pay away from me. So you have to have the ability to force good order and discipline. So I'm going to stop there to see if there's any questions about that. There is one other thing I think you should think about is, and this is a weird concept for us, because I'm a reserve officer, even though I'm I'm the commanding officer of the preliminary hearing unit. We do most of the preliminary hearings across the active duty Navy. And I have the privilege of being a reserve officer and a civilian. You can walk down to your county courthouse right now, and you can watch a trial. You can watch plea bargains. You can watch all sorts of stuff going on in courtrooms. You should do it if you haven't done it. It's really interesting. Don't just watch Law and Order. Go see it in action. Any one of you, especially you youngsters, can go off to law school, become a lawyer, and become a great trial lawyer if you put the work into it. I guarantee it. Especially when you go to courthouses and watch some of the people practicing in front of the local courts. We don't have standing courts in the military because we don't have a huge criminal problem. And so what's unique about the military is, yes, we have courthouses and courtrooms. That's just a physical structure. But when a crime is to be charged, the boss, Admiral Kaplan, Admiral Gilbert, they literally create on a piece of paper what's called a convening order, a bringing together of a court-martial. So we don't have standing courts. We just create a court for a defendant for a trial. We then send that case to the prosecutors and the defense counsel, and they get their trial. All military accused are provided free defense counsel. JAGs, I've been a defense counsel in the Navy. They can get a civilian counsel at no expense to the government. The judges are military officers, senior military officers like me. The jury are officers like me, not lawyers or doctors usually. If you're enlisted, you can choose a jury composed of at least one third enlisted members. And here's another difference. Whereas out in town at the federal or state level, the conviction has to be, of course, beyond a reasonable doubt, same standard in the military, has to be a unanimous jury decision. In the military justice system, it's only 2/3 to convict. The last thing I'll leave you with is, you all see me in military uniform, and based on your traditional civilian notions of military justice, you're like, oh, they're hardcore in the military. They put people in a slammer forever. Could not be further from the truth. We don't hire criminals. We don't have people with long rap sheets. Most of the crimes committed by people in the military are relatively, they're first-time offenses usually. They usually have a military record, which sometimes is distinguishing. And so people get convicted of crimes in the military, but the sentences in the military tend to be way below the sentences you would get in the civilian context. And I won't bore you with the statistics, but you just got to trust me on that. That doesn't mean the crimes are any less heinous. It just means that these people come to the trial with a distinguished military record.
Oh,
yeah,
he's back.
so I'll leave you with that, but I wanted you to sort of think about that and then ask away.
We lost you there. You froze.
Oh, am I unfrozen?
You did the Madonna Vogue. You know, we kind of like lost you there for a minute. Okay, so oh my gosh, I have so many questions. Okay, there was a lot of information there. Thank you. That was wonderful. Okay, well, naive question, since I don't know. My dad was in the Air Force, by the way, and I thank you so much for your service, Captain. I really thank you for your service. And okay, so if you are convicted, the sun is coming in here. If you are convicted, do you go to a typical federal prison or something? Does that ever happen? I mean, I know it's rare, but where? And I guess my other question that's a little bit of a 1-2 step. You talked about the courts. Let's say you're in, my dad, we lived all over. We lived in Little Rock, Arkansas, Lincoln, Nebraska, all these bases. But let's say you commit the crime at Lincoln, Nebraska. Is the court just thrown together right there on that base? Or, so that's my first question. And then also, what happens if you're convicted? Where do you do your time, so to speak? I'm going to close my shade while you answer. Go ahead. Let's see. Oh, do he freeze up again? Oh. Okie dokie. Maybe Aubrey, maybe he should shut down, Aubrey, and go back on. I think it'd be good if you want to call them. Well, I just think that we'll just chit chat for a minute or
I
someone would
think
like.
everyone was frozen there for a minute.
Yeah, you were actually.
Oh, okay. So Janine, you're in New York, is that right?
Currently, yes.
Okay, so if you commit a crime in the city of New York, then the county prosecutor, Manhattan, DA's office would file the charges. No other county can file the charges. Same with any of the other people on this screen. The county prosecutor's jurisdiction over you is limited to the county you're in. In the military, if you're in the military has worldwide in personam jurisdiction over you. You could be in space, you could be on a submarine in the South Pacific, you could be at a bar in Iceland wearing civilian clothes. If you commit a crime that is a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice and you're on active duty, the military has jurisdiction over you. So the place where you commit it doesn't matter in the military. Whereas in all the other jurisdictions, the place where you commit the crime does matter because there are jurisdictional boundaries on that. To your where you serve your time question, Janine, it depends. If you get a year or less, typically you would serve that at a local military detention facility in your area. So in the Navy, we have a brig down in Norfolk, a brig in Charleston, a brig in San Diego. I think there's a brig down in Texas, one in Pensacola, and I think one up in Bremerton.
What do you mean by brig?
A brig is a little jail. It's a tiny little jail that probably has 15 cells, 30 cells, something like that. It's not, the Ritz-Carlton, but it's not as austere as your mind would have it believe. I mean, they are certainly, very well professionally run prisons that look no different than the best run prisons at the state and federal level. If you get more than a year, in other words, a felony conviction, it's very likely that you'll go to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. And that is a consolidated joint military detention facility where members of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard would serve longer periods of sentence. There are a couple exceptions. And the exception is, for example, if you're going to serve a long period of time and your family's, let's say, up in North Dakota or somewhere far away from there, and they can't visit you and they want to, you can request that you serve your military detention, your prison sentence in a federal facility near your family. And sometimes those are granted for humanitarian reasons.
Okay, so if it's a year under, it's a brig in the area. New word. I mean, yeah. I feel really intelligent using that word now. But then if it's over a year, you go just to a basic federal, but it is a federal.
Usually Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Usually that's the default. You're all going to Kansas unless you get one of the exceptions.
And is that still a military prison?
Yes, there's several. There's actually 3 prisons at Fort Leavenworth. There's the federal pen for the people who got convicted by the U.S. Attorney's Office. There's the military consolidated, and there's a state prison. They're all together.
Okay, but so wherever you serve your conviction is still within the military prisons, unless you specifically ask for one near your family.
Correct.
I bet there aren't a lot of people in them. I bet they're kind of quiet.
There's a few thousand. There's not a lot. I mean, again, we don't have a lot of criminals in the military. So to put it in perspective, I think in the Navy last year, more or less, I think we prosecuted 300 court-martials. That's it. To put that in perspective, the U.S. Attorney, the DA here in D.C. probably prosecuted 15,000 cases.
Right. Yeah.
And
okay.
That's just for the District of Columbia.
Yeah, I want to toss it to Tova, but I just want to go back to one other question because you've been freezing up a little bit. If you're in Iceland or Lincoln or wherever you are, whatever base, Texas, wherever you may be, where's the military court, so to speak, with the jury of your peers and all of that? Where is that going to happen? There in the area? It's just like a court. You have a court. Is there like a courthouse on every base? A courtroom in every base, and you're prosecuted right there?
the bigger the base, the more likely it is they have a courtroom. But we hold courts martial on Navy ships. We hold them. I've done a court martial when I was stationed in England and Scotland in a classroom of a building. It doesn't really matter if you have a fancy courtroom. It just matters if you have a judge, a jury, a defense counsel, and a prosecutor, and a fair process. So we make do, but in the bigger bases or posts around the military, around the world, we have courtrooms that you would.
So it happens in the area where the crime's committed usually.
Doesn't have to, no. And in fact, if a crime is committed on a ship somewhere on deployment, oftentimes they'll fly everybody off the ship, witnesses and the accused, to a bigger base where they'll have the court martial. So for example, the Navy's in Keflavik, Iceland. We have a base there. So, you know, if a crime is committed there, it might be there. By the way, there's another twist to this, and that is, I was stationed in San Diego. I had some great duty stations: San Diego, London, Pearl Harbor, Jacksonville, Florida. I mean, I really lucked out. Newport, Rhode Island. Let's say I'm a sailor and I'm in San Diego and I go out in town and I do some bad things and commit a crime. Let's say I break into a car or steal a car or something. Yes, the military has jurisdiction over me, but so does the county DA. And more likely than not, a lot of the crimes that sailors commit off base, they get arrested by local police, who then find out these are military members, and then they work it out between themselves as to whether the military is going to exercise their jurisdiction over the guy, or the civilians are going to exercise jurisdiction over the guy. And it gets even trickier overseas. So for example, Japan, Germany, you name it. We have people stationed in dozens of countries around the world. If a sailor goes out into town in Japan and commits a crime, especially a crime against a civilian Japanese national, we could, under the existing agreement with Japan, we could say, no, we'll take it. But if it's a heinous crime and they get a lot of press, the Japanese may say, nope, we're going to prosecute this guy in our civilian courts in Japan for violating our criminal law. And so it depends on where it happens sometimes as to who will exercise jurisdiction.
Fascinating. Well, I'm going to toss it to Tova. It's interesting. I doubt we've had a court martial in space yet, but I guess
we will.
Someday. Won't that be interesting? The first one in space. Okay, Tova, go ahead.
This is fascinating just to learn so much, and thank you for all of your service and everything. I was curious, do the military laws differ during wartime versus peace, and in active war zones versus, you know, in the US?
If I understand your question, you're asking me, does the law or the applicability of the UCMJ change when we're in war compared to when we're in peace? Is that the question? The answer is no. The UCMJ applies in war or peacetime. The little twist to that, Tove, and I always love your questions because you're thinking 3 levels below, is military commissions. Military commissions have been used since the beginning of our country. They're used against opposing enemy forces who commit law of war crimes. And so although we have the current military commissions against terrorists at Guantanamo Bay, we've had commissions going all the way back to the beginning of our country. Those are tried against non-citizens who are fighting against the opposing enemy force, but that's an infinitesimal number of these trials. I'm talking dozens versus tens of thousands of other ones. But no, I mean, look, I've been in the military since 1992. I'm coming up on my 30th year next year when I retire in February. I came in at the end of the first Gulf War before you guys were born. The war ended. We had peace. 9/11 happened. We went to war, but the same UCMJ provisions have applied the entire time, and we're still in a state of armed conflict. We're still in a state of war. And nothing changes with respect to the applicability of the UCMJ.
Great, thank you. And then what about people that commit crimes against military members? Are they tried in military court or in civilian court? Or what if it's in another country?
Great question. No, the military only has jurisdiction over active duty soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines when they commit the offense. And so we do not have in personam jurisdiction over civilians, nor should we. Remember, the purpose of the military justice system, Tova, is to allow commanders to enforce good order and discipline over their armed forces. It has nothing to do with us enforcing good order and discipline over the civilian population, because there's civilian control over the military. And so if a civilian commits a crime against a military member, and it happens every week, then the civilian jurisdiction, if they chose to, could move forward with criminal charges against the civilian.
Okay, and what if it's a civilian, say in another country, that commits a crime against a military member, but the country doesn't really have a developed judicial system, or it's a war zone where the government isn't very strong?
Yeah, then that's a freebie for that civilian who committed that crime against the military member. And that's a bloody shame, but that's a risk that we take. But we still don't exercise jurisdiction over civilians. We only exercise court-martial jurisdiction over military members.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm just curious, as a broader question, does your military experience impact the way you view the American government at all? And in what ways?
I think every experience we have impacts the way we think. So I think the answer has to be yes. I just don't know how. I can say at first blink that it's given me a deeper appreciation since I've been stationed overseas, Tova, of the exceptional nature of the construction of our Constitution and our separation of powers and our respect for the rule of law. It's given me a respect for cultures and legal regimes in other countries. Of course, as a defense lawyer, prosecutor, and judge, and then served with as a Joint Special Operations Task Force, JAG, with the SEALs and other operations I've been on. It's given me immense respect for diplomacy and alternatives to war. Nobody I know, Tova, in the military wants to go to war. In fact, they want the exact opposite. My dad fought in World War II in the Navy in the Pacific with the Marines. He was a Navy signalman. His dad was a pilot in the 1920s in the Navy. I don't know anybody who's been in the military who wants to go to war. And so I guess, by definition, I have to say having the privilege of wearing the uniform for these short 30 years has impacted my love of country and my understanding of some of the challenges that our country is engaged in.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And then I was also wondering, does the Constitution apply in the same ways to members of the military, or can any of the constitutional rights be limited in cases in the military? For example, freedom of speech or freedom of religion or something like that?
Yeah, that's a very sophisticated and good question. So your parents probably can try to order you to brush your teeth and make your bed and do what they want you to do. You can say no. I'm sure as a teenager, maybe once or twice you said no. In the military, once or twice, yeah. In the military, that's different. And so we have abrogated or adumbrated rights compared to a regular civilian. So I can't go out in uniform and exercise the same First Amendment rights that I would were I civilian. So I can't, for example, go out and besmirch the reputation or judgment of the commander-in-chief or the Secretary of the Navy or Defense, because that undermines good order and discipline. I can't, for example, enjoy the same rights you have for freedom of association. I can go to rallies, I can go to protests, but I can't use my uniform and my position in the military as a way of suggesting that I am representing the military when I speak out, because I don't have that same freedom. And you know this when you get into the military. It's a trade-off. When you sign up for the privilege of representing the country and serving the country and wearing her uniform, and that you're willing to give up your life for your country, you know that there are certain trade-offs along the way. But I can tell you that we certainly enjoy a heck of a lot more freedom and rights as military members in the United States military than most other service members in all other countries in the world.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. In your experience, how is the American military court system different than those in other countries?
Well, I'm biased. I think ours is the best. And I think ours is the best because we have a very robust set of rights and privileges that we afford the accused, including the presumption, the constitutional presumption of innocence, the Fifth Amendment right not to say anything that could incriminate oneself. We add an extra layer of rights on top of that called Article 31B rights, where anyone in the military, not lawyers, anybody in the military can warn somebody else if they suspect them of a crime. So that's rights on top of Miranda. And so we have a number of checks and balances built into our military justice system, which came over for the common law and have been improved upon, that I think makes our military justice system a model. And in fact, you don't have to take my opinion for it. Our military leaders, and including JAGs at the senior levels at the Naval Justice School, the Naval War College, the Army War College, we go around the world and we teach other senior military leaders about our military justice system and what they can do to improve their military justice system. Because honestly, if you don't have a fair justice system, then ultimately the people won't have confidence in the outcome of courts-martial or accountability measures in the military. And so again, the military justice system exists to allow commanders to fight and win wars, but also it's a measure of our humanity as a society. And so I was very proud to be a defense lawyer in the military, and I defended people who to the best of my ability, and I was proud to be a prosecutor, just like all my brothers and sisters who are JAGs who've done both and had the privilege to do both. And I think our system is a model for the rest.
Wow, wonderfully put. Thank you so much. This was fascinating, and I will pass it on to Jewel and Jordan.
Hello.
Hi.
It's pretty cool. I'm hearing all that. My initials are Jag, Jewel Anthony Gilbert, so got a connection.
I'll send you my honorary mill rind so you can wear it.
There we go. So what's the pathway to become a JAG or military judge? What does that look like?
Great question. So go to high school, graduate, go to college, graduate, go to law school, graduate. And then you can apply for a commission in the armed forces of your choice, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. And if you're accepted, then you go to the basic lawyer course, which is for the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard is 9 weeks at Newport, Rhode Island. But first you have to go to the officer candidate course. And so that is anywhere from, I don't know, 6 to 10 weeks. So you do the basic officer course first. If you graduate from basic officer course, then you go on to the basic lawyer course for another 8, 9, 10 weeks. And then in the Navy, you then head as a class, usually a class of 55 or 60 students, down to Norfolk, Virginia. You learn about the front and back end of a ship, which is called the bow and the stern. You get to ride in an F-14 simulator. You get to get on a submarine and walk around. You get to hear from admirals and all sorts of swanky people. You get to go see the Navy SEALs and see all their cool toys. And you get to hear from warfighters about the importance of the rule of law and the importance of you as a baby JAG and what you need to learn to be able to advise them later on. Then you're going to have a bunch of tours, Jorn, from a baby defense counsel, baby prosecutor, work your way up to be a lawyer advisor to a warfighter, a submariner, any number of other jobs. And then eventually when you get to be old like me, and you've been around the block a bunch of times, you might get chosen, you'll apply for and you might get chosen to be a judge, especially if you stay in courts martial for a long time.
All right. It's pretty cool. I think that the general population, there's a certain mystique about how things work in the military because we hear about so many military jobs, and so many of them that are not necessarily related to combat. It's always cool to hear how it happens and what all those different opportunities really that you have and what makes it work. It's cool when you talk about as well, just the population sample that you have in the military based on and how they don't commit anywhere near the same percentage of crimes. So as much as you need to have the courts, those courts are not even necessarily standing courts. They don't have to be standing courts. I'm surprised about that. I didn't realize the military didn't have standing courts. What is the constitutional foundation for the military courts? Where was it? How were they? Where is it?
So you know from our previous time together on this show that Article 2 it lays out the executive power will be found in one president of these United States. And within that Article 2 is the fact that the president of the United States is the commander-in-chief of the Army and the Navy. And so that is the constitutional hook for the delegation of authority to enforce good order and discipline in the armed forces. So it flows from the commander-in-chief down through the Senate-confirmed persons in charge of the military and the uniform side. But like I said, and I wrote in a very long research paper about the military justice system, the military justice system actually predates the beginning of our country because our British forefathers had military courts, for hundreds of years before the United States was even an idea. And so I think we've improved upon that. We've professionalized the administration of justice in the military. But of course, there can always be improvements because these are human invented enterprises. I would say the other way to get into the JAG Corps is the best way. And that is have the taxpayers pay for it. And so you can go into the military as a surface warfare officer, as an Army person, a Marine artillery officer, and then do really well. And then after 3 or 4 years in there, apply for what's called the Funded Law Education Program, FLEPR, F-L-E-P-R, Funded Law Education Program. And if you're selected, and it's very competitive, then the military pays for you to go to law school free of charge. Taxpayers are paying for it. And you do your 3 years of law school, and then you owe the military 6 years or so for that time of that free law education program. So if you can get, I didn't even know about the program when I did it. I went to college and worked for a few years, then went to law school on my own dime, and then I went into the military. But that's the good gig, Jordan. So if you can work that out, do that.
Then last question for me till Jordan starts is, what do you think the civilian courts, is there anything the civilian courts could take from the military courts to improve? Not that they could necessarily reflect any of the same policies, but is there anything that you could look at in a local state, my county court, that I could look to the military court and learn?
I think each can learn from each other, frankly. So, I've had the privilege of being in both court systems. And when I was a judge, I stole some of the best practices from the civilian system. So, for example, in the military, we have a habit and custom of having jurors sit in the jury box all day long, and sometimes till 10, 11, 12 at night. I just think that's wrong. I think we owe the jury much more respect than that. And so what I do in my courtroom is I have a juror's bill of rights, which I've seen in civilian courts. And I tell them up front, You're going to have a potty break from 10 to 10:15 every day. You're going to have a lunch break from 12:30 to 1:30. You're going to have an afternoon coffee break from 3 to 3:15, and we are going to secure for the day at 5 o'clock, which is 1700 in the military. We don't do that. I do that in my courtroom, and judges have the plenary power. On the civilian side, that would be really good for them to learn how to start on time and end on time too. They do that very well in the military. So I think each can learn from the other. And remember, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of different courthouses across this country at the local and state level. So there's not one system, that's not operated uniformly. Like I said, there's 2,300 DA offices around the country and many, 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 many more courtrooms and judges around the country. So I think, the beautiful thing about this organization, and the reason I always say yes when I'm asked to come back, is you're a learning organization. You thrive on learning, on knowledge. And good lawyers thrive on, and throughout their career, yearn for more knowledge. And so I think that there are things we do well across the military justice system that the civilian system could benefit from, and vice versa. But it boils down to the individual person, because that's what a criminal justice system is. It is millions of people working in an ecosystem that hopefully rises above pettiness and follows the rule of law and the ethics that undergird it.
Thank you.
So I kind of have a sort of piggyback on that question. It relates to it. A lot of the prosecutions in the military courts seems like there is less gray area than you would run in a general court system because of the stark rules. As you mentioned earlier, like going AWOL. In your experience, first, is that true? And second, would you say that trials are quicker, more direct, maybe?
No and yes. It's not true, but trials are quicker. Here's the thing. In the military justice system, as I was saying, the jury are officers. These are people who not only graduate from college, many have graduated from graduate school. And they're incredibly bright. So are the senior enlisted people who end up on these juries. When the judge, like me, gives them the jury instructions, they actually read them. They actually follow them. And so if they don't think the prosecution proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt, they find him not guilty. And so the trials are quicker because we don't, for example, offer unlimited questioning to the jurors before a trial. So, I mean, when I was a baby DA in San Diego doing misdemeanor cases, started off, as a baby prosecutor when I got out of the military in the civilian system. I'm not kidding. It would take me 2 days, a day and a half to pick a jury for a DUI case. You know how long it takes you to pick a jury in a DUI case in the Navy? 30 minutes. Trial's over in half a day. And so I'm not saying one is better than the other, but in terms of efficiency, in terms of speed, the military justice system is quicker. Now, military trials are free and open proceedings, subject to the 6th Amendment, fair trial proceedings. And so people, you can go to a military courts martial, shoot me an email, and I'll tell you the local court martial, and you go down and watch it. It's just not. Most people don't go watch military courts martial. They watch Law and Order from their couch. And so, but no, it's not harsher. It's not more draconian, but it is quicker.
And just one more clarification question real quick. I just want to make sure I understand. So the military courts will only be enacted on somebody of active duty. So your military reserves, your National Guard, there's really no jurisdiction over them unless they're active.
So that's a brilliant question, and it's a timely question, because the rule right now is that if you've been ordered to active duty, or you've been on temporary active duty for 30 days or more, you're subject to the jurisdiction of UCMJ. So if I get reactivated tomorrow and I'm on active duty one day, I can be court-martialed. Or if I go on temporary active duty for, let's say, 60, 90 days, once I've been on active duty for 30 days, I'm subject to the jurisdiction. Remember, most of the crimes that people commit, though, there's dual jurisdiction. So if I carjack somebody out here in Washington, D.C., and I'm on active duty, I can get prosecuted by the local DA, or I could get prosecuted by the military, and they'll have to work that out. And by the way, trick question for you young guys out here. Okay, ready for the trick question? Tova, I'm gonna try to trip you up. Right?
Mhm.
It's a double jeopardy question. Have you heard of double jeopardy?
Yep. Yeah.
Right, Tova, you heard of double jeopardy, right? You've talked about this in Constituting America. Okay, here's the trick question. Here's the hypo. I steal $500 of stuff from Target or Walmart. I get caught red-handed, video, confess. I'm on active duty in the military. Can I be prosecuted by the military and the local DA?
I would just guess that because one's the executive branch, one's the judicial, there's no double jeopardy, possibly.
What does the double jeopardy clause say?
I don't know. I know that you can't be tried for the same case. You can't be tried for the same crime twice.
Okay, you can't be tried but you can't be tried twice for the same crime, right? So what do you think? Are you waiting for them to try to answer first?
I don't know. I don't think that would be allowed, but you did say it was a trick question, so you're making me doubt. But I know the text says, no person shall be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. So it
Right.
sounds like no.
So the DA cannot prosecute Stimson for stealing $600 worth of Doritos chips from Walmart when I'm on active duty if the military is going to prosecute me or vice versa. We're all in agreement with that, right?
Yeah.
We're all wrong. All right. Because, here's a trick question, because these are different sovereigns. The county can't prosecute me twice, but we're talking about local DA, local jurisdiction, that's one sovereign. Federal jurisdiction is a different sovereign. So you can't be tried twice by the same sovereign for the same crime. And that's the way that double jeopardy clause has been interpreted. Now, it rarely, if ever, happens, but it has happened. So if somebody gets a really light sentence for a crime in the military and the victim is a civilian, the local jurisdiction says, you know what, that 1 month sentence, that's not good enough. We're going to jack them up and prosecute them, or vice versa. In the military, if they're the second one to go at it, then they have to get the approval of the Judge Advocate General herself to go forward with that subsequent federal military prosecution.
Well, thanks for starting. Thanks for diving into that for
You know,
us.
I was going to try to stump you. I mean, I always do that, but yeah, but it
Maybe
makes you
pass it
think.
over for some audience questions.
Sure, fire away.
Thank y'all so much. And we've got some really great audience questions. And first of all, John Chambers mentions that in Article 1, Section 8, and I think it's actually Clause 14, says to make that the Congress has the power to make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. And what I was wondering, I guess when you start talking about the military code or the UCMJ, I didn't quite dawn on me that the Congress would write those laws. Does the military have any say in what the laws are that govern them then? If they decide they want something changed in that code, do they have to go to their members of Congress and ask that it be changed? And how does that work?
Yeah, well, John is right. Obviously, you know, the question that you asked me before is where do they originate? It originates under the Article 2 power of the president as commander-in-chief, but Article 1, Section 8 does specifically assign to the legislative branch to assign the rules, and that's where the UCMJ comes from. And so if once, like there's almost every year now, we've seen new changes to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. There's a Senator Gillibrand proposal that's making it through the Senate National Defense Authorization Act process as we speak. It's going to change some of the way the rules are handled and written. And so, yeah, if you're going to change the rules, if you're going to change UCMJ, then Congress and Congress alone has the authority to do that. There is some leeway in the executive's authority to work on evidentiary rules. And so we have seen that the president, through executive order, can change some of the rules, but the big ones, and I won't bore you with the details, get changed by Congress through statute.
Okay. And then David Sawyer asked, can you explain the reasoning behind a 2/3 verdict in military trials as opposed to a unanimous verdict in civilian trials?
Yeah. Well, first off, not every state requires unanimity in their state constitutions for a conviction. Many other countries, most other countries, don't require unanimity in their juries for conviction if they even use juries. Many are judge-alone trials. And so I think that if you step back to the original purpose of a criminal justice system in the military, it's not the purpose that we have in the civilian sector. It is not to enforce the criminal law of the jurisdiction. It's to give commanders the ability to enforce good order and discipline. And so the Congress has decided from the beginning of time, when they've legislated the UCMJ, that 2/3 is sufficient to send a message that you shouldn't be engaging in this behavior as long as the government's proved this case beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, Congress has debated this, to David's question, and they've upped the level to 3/4 for crimes that have a sentence of 10 years or more. And of course, in death penalty cases, which are few and far between in the military, it does require unanimity. But we hardly have any death penalty cases ever in the military.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. And then Bill Koenigke asked the question, which has been in the news quite a bit, about requiring members of the military, or the possibility, I guess, of requiring members of the military to be vaccinated, those who might not want to be vaccinated. And if in fact, and I honestly don't quite know where this stands, but if they are required, if service members are required to receive a COVID inoculation and they refuse to, would they be court-martialed? And then how would the military handle this massive surge in caseload?
Yeah, so I'm going to recuse myself from answering that question only because those types of cases could come before me or members of my command. But let me just say generally to Bill's question that there is ongoing litigation filed by several organizations against the mandatory vaccine mandate of military members because there are no exceptions for religion and for other reasons. And so that litigation is pending. But suffice to say, if the commander-in-chief through the Secretary of Defense issues a direct and lawful order, and people don't follow a lawful direct order, they can be court-martialed. But I'm going to pass on trying to answer that question in any more granularity because those cases could be referred to an Article 32, and I'm the head of the preliminary hearing unit, and I or any of my judges could be assigned to I'm the one that assigns my judges to these cases, and so I'm going to punt on that one.
Understand. Well, and we are at 3:01. Janine, do you want to make some closing comments?
Well, I just want to say, oh wait, hang on, am I muted?
No.
Hey, that Captain, you were amazing once again. Just really wonderful, Captain Stimson. Yeah.
Well, anyone who's a JAG could have answered any of the questions I asked because we have a really well-trained force and a well-educated force, and I'm no different than anyone else who serves in the military, and you should be proud as Americans that you have men and women serving in all the armed forces who are well-trained and well-equipped and are able to give good legal advice to commanders.
Well, I am proud, and I'm also proud of and amazed really of the willingness to take a command and follow it no matter what. It's a real loss of, in a way, kind of, personal liberty, or because they believe in the system and they want to protect their country, and they're willing to sacrifice that. So
Yeah.
many things. My dad used to always say to me, because he was supposed to fly the B-58 Hustler to Russia in the Cold War, and he would say that there were great odds he wouldn't make it back. So I was always aware that my father was willing to go, could potentially die to serve his country. But there's also, with our conversation today, and in closing, I just think it's really interesting to think about the fact that you're not just willing to sacrifice your life, you're willing to sort of sacrifice a certain amount of rights to follow the command. You might not agree with it, but you're going to follow the command, and that's a certain type of person that I truly admire. That's willing to do that for the bigger cause. That's a hard thing to do.
Well, I'll leave you with a thought, Janine, because I know this will matter to you and your colleagues. Years ago, Tom Brokaw wrote this book called The Greatest Generation. It was about the men and women, mainly men, who fought in World War II on behalf of the United States. And my dad, who was a vet, humble like most World War II vets, didn't want to really talk about his service. I gave him the book as he was dying, and wanted to talk with him about that. And he read it. And he said to me, I don't agree with the title.
What was the title?
The Greatest Generation.
Ah, okay.
I said, why not, Dad? And he said, every generation of Americans is the greatest generation. We just did our job. And so, I think of the young people that you have so eloquently pulled together for this organization. And, I'm sure that Jordan and Jewel get a haircut and slap on a uniform. I'm sure Tova and everyone else who is under your wing would do their duty if they had to. And so I think, arming yourself with the information you need to make intelligent decisions, but also being patriotic and understanding your rights under the Constitution is part of being a responsible citizen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, true. That's very true. And everyone serves in their own way.
Yeah.
We all come together and serve,
Yep.
because if we all serve the same way, there'd be a lack in other areas. But anyway, my greatest admiration for you, truly, and my greatest respect, and for everyone in the armed forces today on this Pearl Harbor Day, and the remembrance of, truly, in honor of your dad, was a great generation. How's that?
They were.
to honor your father's wishes. But thank you so much. It's just been great having you with us, and we learned a tremendous amount. I think this entire series on the court system has been really, really informational. So, and we do love to learn here, continue sapping up information. So thank you for being a part of this process so
Thanks
eloquently.
for having me as always. Yep, loved it.
All right, great. Thank you. And see you soon in other professions.
Okay, good.
We'll talk about the other as
Thanks.
well. Okay,
Bye.
thank you all. Have a
And
great day.
we want to invite everybody back next week for our wrap up Tuesday at 2. Ed Whalen is our guest. And I'd also like to give a special shout out to a member of our audience I see that's been on the whole time, Lola Reinch, who is such a great supporter of Constituting America. Lola, we thank you so much for all the generous ways that you support our programs. Thank you for joining us.
Yes,
Thank you to
Lola.
everybody.
All right, see you next week. And then after that,
Bye.
it's economy. So that's going to be a lot of fun. All right. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.